Hello, welcome to our online lesson devoted to IELTS Writing Task 2. My name is Bazarbayeva and I will present you some topics for discussion. Today we are going to talk about two topics on IELTS Writing Task 2. These are the comparison and contrast essays. I believe that all of you heard of them, but still, can you tell me, what do we mean by comparison and contrast essays? You have 1 minute to answer this question. Okay, the aim of the lesson is to develop understanding and practice of comparison and contrast components of IELTS Writing Task 2. The objectives are: as students, you will be able to define comparison and contrast structures, practice writing comparison-contrast essays, watch a video and discuss it as a class. Well, writing a comparison-contrast paper involves comparing and contrasting two subjects. A comparison shows how two things are alike, and contrast shows how two things are different. It is very easy since we are comparing almost everything in this world, and from the early childhood we think that our brothers are taller and our sisters are smarter or more beautiful. So comparison is not a new thing to us. And the first thing I want you to consider is, when you choose a topic, be sure not to choose two totally unrelated subjects. You must start with subjects that have some basic similarities, like two movies or two short stories, two history books, two lessons, two holidays. So these constructions should be parallel. They should have some basic similarities. They cannot be unrelated. They should be closely related to each other. The next thing, as you remember from previous lesson, we are going to brainstorm. Brainstorm everything you know about each subject and then go back and look for connections that show similarities and differences. Well, I want you to brainstorm about two seasons, spring and autumn. I want you to jot down all the ideas that comes to your mind in 3 minutes. Time has started. Now, I hope you have the whole list of brainstorming the ideas about autumn and spring. Let me share my template with you. I decided to make a brainstorming in a different way. I decided to make a table. Look at it now. So, points of contrast and comparison, and we have autumn and spring in here. So the main points are temperature, changes, colors, location, and symbolism. Well, let's go against the two things that are compared. The temperature can be cooler in autumn and warmer in spring. Changes, leaves change in autumn and flowers bloom in spring. Colors are both of brilliant type, both in autumn and spring. The location, it is normally preceded by winter. The autumn is preceded by winter and spring is preceded by summer. And the last thing is the symbolism. Well, autumn is closely associated with death and spring with birth. Easy, right? I think your brainstorming also had a different structure because we have a variety of types of brainstorming and whatever it comes to your mind. Secondly, you have to develop a thesis. As any other essay, comparison and contrast essay needs to have a thesis statement. The thesis statement will evolve from the brainstorming. Indeed, if you write a lot of ideas that come to your mind without stopping to think on a piece of paper, you will have a bunch of brilliant ideas that will help you to write a thesis statement. Look at your first of all at your list and ask yourself some questions. Question number 1, is there something important, significant, or interesting in the similarities and differences on my list? And what have I discovered about my two topics? I want you to answer these questions in 2 minutes. Now it's time to write a thesis statement. Well, I decided to share with you mine. So, although there is an exquisite beauty in the seasons of autumn and spring, there are also distinctions which allow each season to stand on its own. You have to organize your essay, and the introduction of your essay should mention both subjects in a strong and clearly defined thesis statement. Well, you have to organize your essay as well. There are 2 primary ways to organize the body of your paper: the divided pattern and the alternating pattern. Now, in pairs, I want you to discuss this topic for 5 minutes. Well, now I will tell you what each of these patterns mean. The divided pattern: give all supporting details for one subject and then give all supporting details for the other subject. So, this is the example of divided pattern. Structure of the essay. In first paragraph, you mention introduction and thesis statement. Paragraph 2 consists of discussion and supporting details for subject 1. Let's take it as an autumn. And paragraph 3 will be a discussion and giving support details for subject 2, that is spring. And the last one, concluding statement. Okay. The alternating pattern. Well, the alternating pattern is a bit different from the divided pattern. Well, in paragraph 1, there is also an introduction statement. In paragraph 2, there is a discussion and the details of similarities between both subjects, spring and autumn, and they can take turns of appearance. Paragraph 3, here you discuss and give all the details of the differences between both subjects, spring and autumn. And paragraph 4, concluding statement or a conclusion. Well, concluding statement is usually the conclusion of your paper, and it should include final connections about the 2 subjects and then a restatement of your thesis. Now it's time for you to watch a video. This video will help you to understand better how to write comparison and contrast essays.
Hello, my name is John Botting. I work at a university and I teach English for academic purposes. Today I'm going to talk about 2 types of essay structure, and they're probably the most common types of essay structure that we see, and that's a choice between point by point or block style. So, well, let's start. When we have a point-by-point essay, well, let me back up for a moment. What we have here is the 5-paragraph essay structure. And this upside-down triangle represents the introduction paragraph. And at the end of the introduction paragraph, there's something we call a thesis statement. And a thesis statement is, it acts like the map or the compass for your entire essay. It lets the reader know what you're going to talk about. And in another video, I will talk more in more detail about the general essay structure. So here we have a 5-paragraph essay. This is our introduction paragraph with a thesis statement. And then here's body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, and then the conclusion paragraph. In a point-by-point essay, if we take, for example, the topic digestive diseases, we might first decide that we're going to talk about the pathology. So what are the characteristics of the disease, and how is it bad for people, this disease, the pathology. And then we decide our next point is maybe diagnosis. So in the second body paragraph, we talk about the diagnosis of the disease. And then in our last paragraph, body paragraph, we talk about treatment. So in a point-by-point essay, we have introduction, thesis statement. Something, for example, very simple would be, in this essay I'm going to talk about the pathology, diagnosis, and treatment of digestive diseases. Something like that. And then we have the body paragraph 1, body paragraph 2, body paragraph 3, and then a conclusion. Point by point. Block style. What is block style? We often use block style for compare and contrast essays. So imagine we have, we want to compare and contrast two digestive diseases. So up there it says Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease. I personally don't know the details of these diseases, but just for example, if we wanted, our main heading is digestive diseases, and then we're going to talk about Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease, and we're going to do compare and contrast essay, and we're going to do it in block style. In that case, we have like this. Let's imagine in a very basic way, let's imagine we have 4 paragraphs. We have our introductory paragraph with the thesis statement. In this essay, I'm going to compare and contrast the pathology, diagnosis, and treatment of Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease. Okay, there's a thesis statement. And then we have the first block. We have pathology, diagnosis, treatment, and we're just talking about the similarities. We're comparing the similarities, how all three of, how pathology, diagnosis, and treatment is similar in both Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease. So that whole first piece talks about the similarities. And then in the next block, we might maybe we want to talk about pathology, diagnosis, treatment of Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease, but we're only talking about the differences now. So these blocks are arranged in, this first block is about similarities. We talk about all the similarities there between Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease, or at least the ones we've identified. Similarities, similarities, similarities. And then in the next block, we talk about the differences, all at once. How is that different from point by point? In a point-by-point essay that is compare and contrast, we'll have our introduction, then we have pathology is our first point, and we talk about similarity and differences of Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease with regard to pathology only. That's our first point. We compare and contrast the two diseases regarding pathology in one paragraph. And in the next paragraph, we're looking at Crohn's disease, inflammatory bowel disease, under the topic of diagnosis, and we do similarities, differences together in that paragraph. Third paragraph, we're looking at the treatment of Crohn's disease and inflammatory bowel disease, and we're looking at similarities, differences in that paragraph, right? And it's arranged point by point here. And in each point, you're looking at both similarity and difference, similarity and difference, similarity and difference. That's point by point style arrangement for a compare and contrast essay. Block style arrangement for a compare and contrast essay is, we talk about all the similarities first, then we talk about all the differences next. Introduction, similarities, differences, conclusion. And so what we've done, the reason it's called block, is we've grouped, we've determined that all of these are going to be grouped as one according to similarities. All of these are going to be grouped as one according to differences. There is a general introduction to point-by-point paragraphs, or sorry, rather point-by-point essays and point-by-point. Let me say that again. There is a general introduction to point-by-point essays and block-style essays. We often see block-style essays used for compare and contrast essays, but you don't have to do a block style. You can do a compare and contrast essay in point-by-point style as well. Essays, descriptive essays, persuasive essays, like this, usually we see them in point-by-point, in this way. There, the end.
Well, the home task for you is a revision, and you have to revise the material connected to the use of keywords, qualifying words, and action words. You should bear in mind the structure of the introduction. That is the hook, the background, the controlling idea, and the thesis statement. And I wanted to provide some feedback to me. First of all, what kind of features have you learned on this lesson? You have 2 minutes to answer this question. Question number 2. Would you use those features for your IELTS writing preparation? You also have 2 minutes for this task. And the last question, do you have any more questions? If not, that's fine. Thank you for your participation and goodbye.